you so much for joining us for this remote working and organising events webinar. So I'm joined by Joseph Charlton and Natalie Asprey and Adam Parry, and between them, they've got a huge wealth of knowledge on organising events, both pre-COVID and obviously now post-COVID. And we're going to have a lot of insightful discussion on what the future of events looks like and how people should start pivoting if they're not already into this new world. So I'm going to start with introductions. I'm Chichi. I run a company called Ascenti. We make software that brings people together around events before, during, and after they happen. So we call this social Q&A, which always requires a bit of an explanation. The idea is that rather than having someone set up a Zoom account and create a few webinars or meetings and then hope for the best, we help companies engage a community around what they're planning to do on these virtual platforms on social media, and we give the opportunity to get lovely insights that you can actually start conversations with at the event and before the event on social media as well. So we'll see a few polls. We've been running for this particular event since the middle of May as an example as we go along, and that's my introduction. I'll hand over to Joseph now. He can tell us what he's been doing and what he does.
Oh, hi, I'm Joseph Charlton. I am recently freelance. I was a project director at the former Unicorn Events, where I was delivering kind of large-scale conferences, incentives, and then before that, head events at a company called Don't Panic. At the minute, I'm just freelance and working with, I suppose, any kind of client I can get, and agencies to deliver work, really. A lot of that being more so on the virtual side and thinking of new ideas and creation, but also on the health and safety, working on how we can be COVID secure in this new kind of world, really. So that's it.
That's great. Thank you, Joseph. Over to you, Natalie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie. I'm founder of Natalie Asprey Marketing Consultancy. So, as you kind of guessed by the title, clues there in the name, that's me. We're a small consultancy working with startups, micro businesses, and SMEs, delivering everything from marketing strategy right through to hands-on delivery. So that obviously includes events as well. And one of our clients is Ascenti, which is why we're here today.
Indeed. Over to Adam. Thanks for that, Natalie.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, my name's Adam Parry. I am a publisher. So we write about the events industry and write about technology quite a lot. And for my sins, that led me into organising events. So hopefully I can help talk to you a bit about the challenges around pivoting to virtual and maybe some of the opportunities as well.
Indeed. We've got a little time. So I think we should dive straight into your session, Adam. I feel there's going to be a lot of conversation, especially around Q&A. So let's do each person do the sessions that they've prepared for, and then we can talk at length about the future of events. So we're hopefully going to hear from you about how you adapt and plan events whilst working remotely in this post-COVID world that we all find ourselves in.
Sure. So I'm just going to share my screen. Disabled. Can I share my screen, Chichi?
Indeed, let's do that. Let's make sure that that's possible. Indeed. There we go. Should be fine now.
Right, here we go. And I'll just put this into presenter mode.
Sorry about that. I didn't realise that was the case.
No problem at all. So yeah, Adam, editor at Event Industry News. So the first place I'll start is, let's be honest, online events aren't anything new. Very much in the early years, in fact, in 1999, arguably that was the first foray of online events when a company called Active Touch actually launched the first webinar service called WebEx. And we still see webinars today. I'm sure everybody's having webinar fatigue right now as part of the online events industry, I guess. Is that a new industry? I don't know, maybe so. But there's been some great initial success around online events, ranging right back from 10 years ago. In fact, a company that was probably one of the first online event platforms is a company called iVent, and they've been in existence over 10 years, so have a very healthy business in helping people deliver online events. But in terms of statistics, what might be really interesting for your audience, Chichi, is that today, this was last year, marketers survey, 61% actually use webinars as a way to engage their community, their customers, their audience. So it must be a really effective way for us to actually engage with remote audiences, people that we can't necessarily meet face to face. Luckily for us, as an industry though, in the same survey, 77% of those same marketers valued in-person events higher than they actually did webinars. So we're not out of a job just yet. And on average, you know, webinars or online events, as they've probably been seen up until pre-COVID, actually had quite good turning outs. On an average, 260, 300 attendees registered for most webinars. 50% of those turning up. And actually what was really interesting is even those that didn't turn up to the live portion of the event, you know, that actually meant that they had a way to connect with them after the event and replay and re-engage with them. In terms of the rise to the markets event, I think one of the things that I'll draw your audience attention to most recently is Travis Scott, very well-known American rapper, actually produced the first kind of arguably mass online concert, which actually engaged 10 million people around the world. That for me really cements that there is a market for online events. We just have to understand what's compelling in terms of content, how to deliver that for the audience, and also, let's be honest with you, about how can we make money out of it as well, because that's what we need, right? We need revenue in order to have event businesses. Some of the stumbling blocks though, and some of the observations I've had about this quick shift to online is that lots of the time online event platforms are clunky, they don't work very well. Maybe the actual audience members aren't fully aware of how they should interact with them. It's an alien technology to them, so we need to do our bit to educate the market on that side. We need to obviously educate them on the value as well of coming and actually participating in online events. So that's one major area. Cost, let's be honest with you. Online events are actually just as expensive in some cases as hiring venues. You know, I've seen anything from 10k to 150k plus for a single event. You need some serious revenue in order to be able to deliver that end of the bargain before you've done everything else that you need to do as an event producer, event organizer, planner. There's obviously been low engagement as well up until recently. You know, the engagement rates that we're seeing at the moment are through the fact that nobody can go to in-person events. So it's the only way to engage with event content and event organisers. So engagement rates are up, but that's forced through the current pandemic. And I think there's also been a fear of delivering online events as part of a physical event, let's call that a hybrid event. Up until recently has always been seen as the potential detractor from the physical event, giving somebody an option not to turn up to engage with the sponsors, exhibitors, content, speakers, whatever, seems to be, it was a fear of attrition, right? Nobody wants to cannibalize their own audience and not have them turn up to a physical event. So maybe that's one of the stumbling blocks that we've seen. But let's be honest with you, now is the time to reinvent, accept that we are where we are, and actually learn how this could be a part of our business going forward. You know, there's lots and lots of opportunities around this. New revenue. There is so much opportunity out here. We were talking maybe before Chi-Chi that, you know, actually for me, one of the biggest opportunities of online events, and this is where we need to adapt and understand and learn and develop, is digital revenue. I'll give you an example. A recent friend of mine was delivering a large tech conference, and they had a very, very big blue chip client who wanted to spend money with them. But when they actually looked at the sponsorship costs plus the delivery costs, hotels, staff, time, stand build, sponsorship activation, etc., it didn't make sense for them financially. Now, when that organizer pivoted to virtual, that blue chip customer got back in touch, and they actually spent the same amount of marketing dollars with them as they were going to for the original in-person face-to-face event, because to them, actually, what the benefit was, cost saving, huge amount of cost savings around stand build and stand delivery and, like I said, staff and all that kind of stuff before. But also the metrics that came along with that and the way that they could funnel that back to their own platforms and their own marketing systems. So event organizer one got exactly the same amount of revenue, and ultimately a happier customer out of the back end of it because they save themselves cash. Now, that doesn't mean to say that we should all go just straight online and that's the future and forget physical, but that can make up part and parcel of what the new events industry might look like. We've had a struggle for years as the events industry to really showcase our value and to track ROI. It's always been about a feeling. How do our customers and how do our attendees go away feeling? Now we can actually back all that value up with statistics and even possibly offer much more long-term value by extending the event either pre-show or after event, with even further opportunity to engage with our community or lead capture.
Fantastic stuff. That's really good.
So, sorry, I've not finished quite yet. I've a couple more minutes, but the thing that we need to do is we need to start thinking digitally. And one of the best things that we now do is we actually live in the age of Google and YouTube. So we can learn anything that we want about anything at our own pace. We can go onto YouTube and we can find out how do we quantify the value of digital marketing? How do I build banner advertising into my platform? What does somebody spend on a webinar sponsorship? And we can start to understand that and package that up for our customers and our events. Some helpful tips for me, 3 areas that I would focus on in order to, really unleash the power of online events. Really start to understand digital measurements, ROI, what do they look like in the online world? Explore content formats that work online as well. That's not to say that what we do in the real world doesn't, work. Lots of it does. Some of it doesn't. But there's also formats online that work that we're not currently taking a part of. That could be a sponsored podcast as part of your event, a series of content, maybe released pre-event that people can start to engage with, start to talk about, the audience can start to get behind. And that's a sponsorship opportunity there for one of your sponsors and a lead up to the event and a great marketing tool as well. So that's a format that you could use as part of your event delivery. And platforms and technology, as far as I'm concerned, are really important. Like I said at the beginning, some of this technology existed for 10 years. It's advanced, obviously, over the 10 years, and it's got a lot better. But it's our job to understand what the capabilities are, how we can use them. I've seen a lot of companies scramble to gain knowledge about how these things work and how they can use them. If we'd invested our time in understanding before, we'd have been in a much better position right now. And that's the opportunity going forward as well. And then this is just one of those things that I really like as a last bit of thought. We can't solve the problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. And that's one of the hardest things that I've seen. We are so used to delivering in-person events and that as a sole thing. And if we can change mindset, if we can adapt, if we can embrace, and let's face it, we are problem solvers as an industry, then we have a very bright future as far as I'm concerned, both in person, online, and hybrid as well. That's me.
Fantastic. That's really good. That is actually really good. I've literally made notes, and you've segued nicely into the thing I forgot to do, which was to present our polls. So some technology. That was amazing, Adam. I really appreciate that. That was really, really good. I'll come back to you on a couple of points that you made, but let's go into this tech section that I should have done before we broke into your bit there. So I'm about to share my screen, and what I'm showing you is some of the polling we've been doing on Ascenti before the event. So Adam touched on the fact that events are now very, very trackable now that we can go into digital world, and I'll share something that gives you some research that we've been doing. Excellent stuff. So the slides, there's only 3 of them. They're going to repeat anyway. So that was brilliant, actually. That was really useful, Adam. I'm going to touch on something you talked about in the Q&A around happier customers spending the same cash, getting more data, and how the reality is that we're moving from not having to provide any ROI for live stuff to being able to have upfront ROI around the engagement that people will get, over versus just the feeling that would normally provide as the big deal break, the big thing that seals the deal for someone wanting to sponsor a conference or an exhibition. But we'll come back to that in the Q&A. So we're over to Natalie now on using content to power virtual events. Take it away, go for it, and tell us what you do in doing that as well.
Okay, so I think the first thing comes back to actually planning an event, because the content's part of that, and it's no different really to planning a physical event. So I think there's been a lot of pivoting recently, but I think there's also been a lot of diving in head first because everybody else is doing it as well. So before you even go down the road of doing an event, the thing you need to be thinking about is why you're actually doing it. So a few moons ago now, I worked in a larger marketing team. Quite often people would come in and say, I want to do an event. And I'd say, sit down, and I'd say, why do you want to do it? And say, I don't know, let's talk about such and such. And I'd say, okay, and this is probably quite a hard-nosed approach. People are like, okay, well, which revenue stream does it relate to? Which of these things that we planned out at the beginning of the year actually tie into this event? And if they couldn't tell me, I'd just say, well, go away and have a think about it then, because it absolutely has to be aligned to your overall marketing strategy and your business goals as well, or your department goals if you're a larger business, or whatever that might be. So I think people go headlong into the planning without actually thinking about why are we doing it. So there will be businesses out there right now that will be seeing other businesses doing virtual events and saying, well, we have to do them too. But if you never did physical ones before, and they were never part of your strategy before, and you haven't lost other elements of your marketing strategy because of COVID, why are you doing them now? Just take a step back and have a think about it first of all. But assuming that you have given that some thought, then the actual planning of the event is not much different to a physical one. I think that obviously the biggest thing, which Adam's touched upon, is that you lose the venue considerations, but they get replaced by the tech platform considerations. But other than that, events marketing like anything else. And so if you're confident that running a virtual event is right, then you can begin planning, and you can think about what kind of event will it be. So somebody might just say it's going to be virtual, but there's still plenty of options. Was it going to be a conference before? How can you adapt that? Is it going to be just a bog standard webinar? Is it going to be just 3 people having an informal chat? Those are all different types of events. So it's important to think about that and to think about the format before you get going. And also, what kind of experience do you want to deliver? We touched on this previously, and it's much harder in a way to deliver that event experience virtually. I think there's a lot more pressure for it to be more high energy, and I think there's quite a lot more pressure on your speakers as well to deliver and be engaging. And there's no pauses really with a virtual event. It's just bam, 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 you're in and it's happening, and you don't need to leave for a minute or have a coffee break or those kind of things. So think about what sort of experience you want to deliver and how you might do that. And maybe if your event, if it was going to be physical, maybe it was 2 hours, maybe it's not, maybe it's 30 minutes. Or if it was a 7-hour conference, well then maybe it's not. Maybe it's separate hourly events that you break up. So be really clear about what your event is about, what's going to be involved, and then you can start asking the more kind of planning questions there. Will you have a speaker? Will you have a panel? Will you have sponsors? Have you got partners to consider? What subjects, topics will you be covering? And of course, what tech platform will you be using to deliver the event? That's not my area of expertise at all, but I'm sure Adam can chip in on some recommendations. My clients are micro and small businesses, so it's almost exclusively been Zoom or Teams use, and I found those absolutely fine for those needs. I think there are other things out there that are more sophisticated, and so again, if it's going to be something a bit bigger or something a bit more bespoke, then it's worth considering those things, particularly if that event used to be a physical event and you've got the budget to do that. So that's kind of thinking about the planning, and there's obviously much more that goes into that. This is an event planning webinar, but if you are new to events, then a really good place to start is an event planning checklist. And don't get hung up on the fact that the event is virtual, because like I say, most of the considerations will be the same. You still got delegate management, you still got the content and the structure of the day. Almost everything actually is the same, apart from the fact that Zoom is your venue. rather than, you know, a hotel or restaurant or whatever. So moving on to content then, since lockdown arrived, I've been working on multiple virtual events for my clients. And one of the best things actually that I've found about a virtual event is versus a physical one. There are so many content options available, and the ease of which you can handle them and keep that buzz alive afterwards. Now, it's not that there's not content options with a physical event, but there's just other considerations. So, for example, with a physical event, you can produce a video, but there's logistical considerations to that. You have to have a film crew on site, for one thing. You also then have to get that film crew off site. They have to go back and edit it, and everything is a slower process, but you can still do it. But the best thing that I've found about using platforms like Zoom and Teams is that the content is just there, available immediately afterwards. So you can take it away and you can use it for whatever you will. And if you've got that capability in-house to edit video and things like that, then you've got the option of making that event last longer and work harder for you very, very quickly. So in terms of an actual content schedule, I think about it in 3 stages, which will probably be quite obvious. So there's there's during the event, which might not be an obvious stage to some people, and there's also post-event. There's different things you can do at different times to maximise the attendance, the engagement pre-event. So the most important thing, obviously, is having the event listed somewhere online. And I know it sounds really obvious, but it's not always obvious. Like I say, people get carried away in the doing, and they don't think about where they're going to send people to get the information. So obviously, if you use something like Zoom or Teams or whatever, that information's there, but you've also got that option as well to pop it on your website if you've got a blog or something like that, and take a bit more brand ownership around it, you know, add a bit more voice or personality to what you want that to be like. Because I think we know from our experience of using these platforms that well, they all look the same. For one thing, you can add a little bit of branding, but you know, if you want to stand out, you've got quite an easy way of doing that there. So then moving into the 3 stages. So having the event listed, definitely with clear information about what the event's about, all the pertinent information, and importantly, how to book. I can't tell you how many social media posts I've seen in the past few weeks with "we're running this great event, please come," and no link in the image either. And then you'll be looking around and saying, well, how can I book onto this thing? And the reality is there's loads of noise and competition out there, and people won't wait long. If I can't find that link in about 30 seconds, I'm not coming. Because, you know, if you want people to be there, provide the information up front. And I just think perhaps those things get forgotten in the rush to do these events, which harks me right back to my very first point about giving it some thought before you just go headlong in. So as well, pre-event, we are pretty heavy on social media, so engaging with speakers and using graphics and tools like Ascented to run interactive polls, get insight from the audience ahead of the event. We also produce supporting content. So, for example, with this event that we're on today, as well as speaking at it, I've also done all the things I'm describing now for this event. So we were producing blogs about the benefits of virtual events, the successful elements of a virtual event, teeing up the subject matter, but not giving everything away, so that the person engaging thinks, oh, actually, these people do know the stuff, you know, we'll come along and we'll see what it's all about. So they're engaged and they're encouraged to come. Something that I do for some of my clients is liaise with speakers during the pre-event stage. So speakers are always really happy to give things for free. So it's great if you can get those resources in the pre-event stage, and you can start sharing them at that point, but also in the next 2 stages as well. But it just adds more weight. It introduces people to your speaker more. You can say, oh, you know, go look at this resource on their website, and so on and so forth. So it's all getting buy-in from the audience before your event even starts. During the event, things like live tweet the event and draw questions from the social media audience, as well as the people actually attending. So a mixture of the two. But if people aren't on the event, but maybe keeping an eye on the Twitter feed or the hashtag, then they can still get involved. So that's engaging them for the next time or the time after that. We also tag the speakers and partners in our posts to create more reach, and do things like screenshots as well. It seems like a really obvious thing, but if you were sat in the audience at an event, or, you know, if you're running comms for an event that day, you'd absolutely take a photograph and post it on social media. So do the same things that you would do there, you're just in a virtual setting. So yeah, it's a screenshot instead of taking a picture on your phone, but Gigi's doing it right now. It's the same thing, and it's for the people that aren't there, it's making them feel like they are. So I think that's really important as well. And we also draw on the speaker resources as well, so they can become really useful. So if somebody's talking about something, if you've already got that in place, posted on a website somewhere, you can drop that in the chat. Everything is much more instant in a virtual event. You don't mind waiting for your resources or for your pack to be handed to you at the end of a physical event. But in a virtual event, I think it's fine to keep engagement high, and just if somebody says, oh, you know, I've written this book, post a link to the book. Or somebody says, I've written this blog, post a link, put it in the chat, because people will pick it up there and then and respond to it. So it just makes the whole thing a bit more interactive and keeps the energy high. And then post-event, it is all go content-wise, as far as I'm concerned. That's where you get the most of your content and where you can make that event work really, really hard for you. And I think that's the thing with all events, but I think the opportunity's there even more with virtual events, because like I said at the beginning, the content's right there in your hand. So to give a real example of that today, there'll be 3 videos that come out of this event. There'll be a full event rerun, there'll be some key takeaways, there'll be a highlights video as well. There'll also be a podcast, there'll be a follow-up blog, there'll be an email in everybody's inbox when you come off this webinar, including all the resources we mentioned, other useful content. And that's something that generally for any client I would do with any event. So I've recently run a series of 6 events. We did a podcast series out of that. We did videos, we did follow-up emails after every session, including resources from all the speakers on the sessions. And then we did a big resource hub at the end of that as well. So collating together all the resources from 8 sessions of 4 speakers per session to create an absolutely massive piece of content, but something that actually wasn't that hard to do in reality, because we were collecting it for each event anyway, and then it was just a case of putting it together at the end. So that's kind of a bit of a whirlwind on content, and then how this can be done with a team that's working remotely. In terms of messaging and how you do this, I would say that it doesn't really change just whether it's a virtual or a physical event. I think you need to be clear from the outset what you're saying about your event, and also what messages are going when. So I think that's important whether your team are all sat around you in the office or whether you're all remote, because you want those messages to go out at the same time, to go out in a certain order that makes sense, to be able to tell a story about the event. So once you've got those things in place as the event planner, or perhaps that might come from the comms or marketing side of the team, just communicate with the team how you want that done. Anybody that's worked with me on any kind of launch or anything like that will be familiar with the launch day plan, or the launch week plan, or whatever it might be. We're saying this at this time, and we're saying this at this time, and we're saying this at this time. You can share this message at this time, and it seems very military. But particularly when a team is remote and you can't just say, lads, we're going live at 10 today, I think it's good to set it out like that so that everybody knows what's going out when. And also, you can give some consideration to the fact that you're probably not just doing virtual events. You will still have other marketing activity going on. So think about that messaging. You will still also have your products and the other thing that your business does. So think about splitting that messaging. If you've got a team of 5, but somebody else is working on another project, well, don't ask them to change everything that they put on social media and things for that week to be all about that event, because it might not be relevant. So think about the people that you engage in the team to support that message, and then include those people in the event. So then people will be kind of familiar with those that shared the message, and then they'll turn up on the event. So it all creates engagement as well, which is important when you're operating remotely as a team, but also when you're delivering an event as a team. So for anybody that's come to any of these virtually speaking events, they have liaised with Chi and myself at some point in the process, so that when we arrive on the day and we arrive on screen, everybody knows who we are. So it's just about keeping engagement up. I work remotely the majority of the time anyway, so I think that this has been something that I've found quite simple to carry on doing in terms of getting messages out whilst a team is remote, because all my clients are remote from me as well. So I think it's just having a clear comms plan for each stage that your team is familiar with, And then you really can't go wrong. It is just about the clarity of your communication about the communication.
Great stuff, and bang on time as well. That's great. That's really interesting. I'm going to move on to Joseph now, because I think if we start doing Q&A now, you will get a word in.
Never stop.
It's been really good so far. So, Joseph, you're speaking about making virtual events feel good. I feel it's a slightly difficult topic to
Yeah.
but
no pressure on it. No.
No. The idea is, what have you learned so far? Because you've done a lot of corporate work, and obviously pre-COVID. And what have you experienced, during the lockdown and coming out of lockdown, that's made you think, actually, these guys have got the feel-good factor. It's a virtual event, and I think this is the secret sauce. I think this is what they did right. Over to you.
Yeah, I think the main way I describe this, I just think it's obviously a really interesting challenge. Obviously, I know Adam mentioned it as well. We are an industry which is problem solvers. And I've kind of done a bit to talk to you. When I first started and this started happening virtually, and I was still at Unicorn before they liquidated, we were, as an agency, still producing an event for Google that had a day conference that was then pivoted instantly online. And the quick fix was we would create a conference pack, and that conference pack would be sent out and everyone could engage whilst they're in the conference with their conference pack. That solution at the time as an immediate pivot seems brilliant. Now, when you look back, you think, actually, that's not enough. And I think the question, how you make virtual experiences feel good, is looking at the fundamental of an event and that physical event and how you push that online, is asking, what do audiences enjoy about events? Why do you love going to an event? Because actually, I love about the big production, or I love everything to do with the big, huge screen, going to a gig, a festival, and that collective feeling of everyone experiencing something with me. And I'm like, that it gives me a buzz. And so then I started to think about, how could I give tips on how we take, these awesome face-to-face corporate events and take it online? And it's just, again, back to the audience. And I think what I've seen currently is online, everyone is going for this content heavy, couple of hours stuck on this Zoom platform, or whether it's a corporate briefing or a corporate update, or companies are just speaking at their staff. And what I miss is that when you have a break, you would go off and you check your emails, but now you're just glued in on a screen completely. So I started to think back actually more about the events perspective. When I first get to an event, I love the food. I go straight for a latte, fresh latte, muffin, I get cake, instant. And I think, okay, so I have people in my audience who just love the food element. I love getting my bento box, in the middle of the day, or having a chef serve me some food. And I think, actually, I'm having a Weetabix before I jump on a Zoom, and then I'm having a chicken sandwich, and I think, I'm not having it. So actually, the things that I'm going to be talking you through is questioning yourself, okay, what can I do that's different for food? People in my audience love the food element. So you can see there's so many options with food when you research DIY kits, when you research getting things delivered, caterers, there's a huge offering. As soon as I've had a bit of food, I'm like networking. I'm okay, great. I've just seen Adam. I want to quickly go speak to him. How's he been doing? There's Chi-Chi. Okay, I need to catch Natalie. There's a huge piece about networking and meeting people, whether that be in your office, your team, whether that just be actually a sales function. So what I've been seeing is a lot of people have been doing speed dating and this coffee morning virtual networking. So how are we bringing that piece into the event that people can sign up to? That's not a part of the larger event. You can join if you want to. Again, it's applying to the people who want to network, who are keen to meet other people. And you can then commercialize it. You're looking at a partner who wants to present his exhibition stand. Well, actually, he's just doing a virtual chat and a pitch for 5 minutes, and there can be Q&As and follow-ups. So it's interesting, actually, looking at it from as a day-to-day delegate, how you approach it. After you finish networking, obviously you go in the main room. You're really excited. This is my piece for the production, for the keynote speaker. But I just love the content. I love the content I'm going to get and the takeaways from that and what I'm going to learn. And I think if you look at some of the big players in the industry, like Adobe, they did their summit and they did a virtual event and it was not live, it was pre-recorded. Now, the reason they did a pre-recorded event is because the level of their content they wanted to push out, they wanted it to be immaculate and perfect. And they allowed their delegates who were attending to either watch as they went, or they could come in their own time and apply to see other different sessions And they could, I want to watch half an hour of content today. I don't want to go to a full conference, so I'm just going to watch that. And then what they realized is actually they're going to bring in some other tools from other big players like YouTube, and brought in an AI feature, which allowed them to then make recommendations on content that that person would like to see. So they started to personalize the virtual journey of the attendee. And it's like, brilliant. So you're starting to think about the people who you want to tick off for content. Then I started to think, when you go to sessions, you've had your food, you've had your lunch, you're getting a bit full, you need that form of fun and engagement, or some entertainment and event. And the events that I've been joining mainly for like my fun in virtual world is there's a company called United Stream that was introduced in Manchester. Phenomenal. I don't know if anyone knows Sasha Lord, but to support the Manchester scene. And they do, there's a group called Homo Block, which is like an LGBT creative group, and they're phenomenal. And they did an online stream. And I think what I loved about them is their creative opening and pushing, but they also told everyone to dress up in a certain way, that they can dance, they can engage, and that you're on this evening, and all of a sudden when I feel connected at a gig or something like that, I see this opening. The next thing you know, I see people who are also watching, engaging, dancing, and then it gives you that collective feeling. And that's the feeling that I had when I was at a gig. I had that same feeling when it was virtual. So it's not that it isn't possible, it's just that how are we asking ourselves, and what are the things that we can bring into the virtual, which is what people enjoy. The other thing with that, I think, is there's other people in the household. So is there family members that can be joined in? Is there partners? Is there something they can be doing that's out of the box that you couldn't do at a face-to-face? I couldn't take my mum to a conference and get her to watch something cool. Do you know what I mean? And I think actually playing on the fun element that differs from a face-to-face event could be exciting. A huge piece that I've seen as well is timing. I know Natalie touched on it, but our attention spans will be less now than 20 minutes. And the content, if you think a conference can push out that level of content for 7.5 hours in a virtual offering, when people are actually living at work now, not working from home, is, in my opinion, not the route. So you need to actually mix it up with different types of activities, different types of content, and allow some of it to be enforced. I think, yes, we can do this fun engagement piece that brings everyone together as a company. That could be 50 minutes. But then other pieces could be, that's pre-recorded. It could be a podcast. It could be join this, that's next week. And it could be a series. And I think that timing and understanding that time is precious at the minute, and trying to get someone to engage for that amount of time isn't possible. And I just think you should invest in what you're doing. I think one of the biggest tips I can say is a lot of companies that are trying to push out great content, etc. If they're not investing in the platforms or the channels or in what they're pushing out, then I think sometimes it can fall, especially if, as an agent or an organizer, you're not challenging your client and saying, does this add value to what you're doing? Because I see a lot of people who are doing like a 40-minute session, and it's like, but does that amount of time add value? Are people signing off? Are people still engaged? I'm not 100% sure, and I'm not an expert at the minute. I'm pushing out into the field as everyone else. But these are the questions when I look at how can I make an impact on what I'm going to produce, and these are the kind of the questions that I've been going through. And the biggest one for me is ask your audience. I think everyone is saying, what makes a virtual event great, or what's going to do this? And actually, if you have a company, and I think there's going to be a big wave of internal comms in some sectors where you're going to have to engage a workforce that is living at work, ask them, what do you want from us? One of the biggest things that I love seeing at the minute is the virtual sports day. I don't know, looking at other channels where people are doing stuff that isn't even corporate, and it's about stealing ideas. The virtual sports day, I think all these kids who are getting their parents to like measure out the tapes, and then there's just videos of loads of kids like merged together sprinting, and I'm like, that's brilliant. That energy and excitement. I'm like, so how do you bring that to a corporate environment? And it's actually thinking, I'm a questions person. I'm constantly like questioning things. But yeah, that's all I have to say on making virtual events feel good, or more so the questions and areas that I would be kind of looking into when trying to pitch and propose what I would put forward.
That was amazing. And I'm not saying that lightly, only because there's things in there. I was writing away, and so was Adam. I was actually thinking you've shed a massive nugget there around food and getting people almost to prepare to be wooed by event organizers because they're getting bento boxes through the door on the day of a conference. I mean, people are at the moment thinking that they can park their food budget for events and, you know, invest on the platform and the tech and everything else. But I see there's an opportunity potentially for community managers, so or publishers, the likes of Adam. This is why I said it's a nugget. Then I think you and Adam should speak about this in future. But people that already manage a community of regular attendees at big events might actually have a nice way into engaging people that wouldn't come to the NEC or to the Excel Centre in London for a big event, but would quite happily sit on Zoom and eat out of a bento box that's been posted to them around an online, you know, mini conference, an online series of events. I think there's something in there for those, but I do think it would need an intermediary in there, someone who's already got that potential group of people that might be happy to, you know, hand over their address and postcode because they're going to be part of this experience and they can get food through the door. So it really does. Your session there, Joseph, just really opened my eyes to actually there's a lot to innovate in the sector at this time, and we should start thinking of it as a way of having more communal sort of get-togethers around things that are of interest to us that are separate from music. I think the music industry has been ahead and always doing things like this anyway. So people would go to Glastonbury, but they might quite happily watch it on BBC Two when it's on TV, because there's still something to be gained by watching a music experience with people in different venues. I think the corporate space, the B2B space, is having to adjust to that in times that we live in. So we're on to the Q&A, and this has been amazing. I've got some very pointed questions for some of you guys. Looking through my notes, I'm going to start with Adam. You talked about this need for ROI and sort of trying to get this happy customer who's paid less for sponsoring an online event and can now get more data and stats out of it. How do you think, as event organizers and event planners in the main, how do you think people should prepare their messaging for this type of new world?
Okay. Yeah, I can totally answer that. But before I do, Joe, I'm going to have to say, you've given me an idea. I think I'm going to have a session called the Bahrain Club from Berlin, and I have somebody like on the door so you can't get in without talking to the bouncer. You'll know what I mean, mate. You seem to be into your clubbing and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the challenges of adding value or showing value for online events is that, especially culturally here in the UK, on the whole, events generally are content-led, but it's free access. On the whole, most exhibitions, most promotional events, etc. There are some really good examples of paid content and pay-to-play content, but on the whole, so the expectation level, and also there's lots of stuff that is done online that is free to access for free. So the expectation level of people isn't matching up. So I think part of it is a transitional period. But when it comes to the sponsor side of things, the money that you would rely on a physical event where the content is free, because that's still an option. Really, the metrics are very much the same, but what you are able to provide your sponsors, your exhibitors, the companies and people that are investing in you and making what you do possible is a lot more information on the success post-event. And then once you have that, you can use that data as the opportunity when you're filling RFPs out or other things to showcase the results of what you managed to do. So as well as all the, as we do in the industry, we show the main stage and the decor and the sound and light and all that kind of stuff, which people totally buy into. And as Natalie said, we should still try and invest as much as possible into the look and feel of our online events. We have all this really interesting information. And what that also presents for sponsors is if they want to get involved in surveying the audience or trying a piece of content, or maybe it's a brand that's trying to promote something before they actually go to market, it's a huge educational learning opportunity about engagement rates. Is this person, on whole, is this group of people engaged with our messaging? Does this session make sense to them? So for me, it's the same numbers that we would from an existing event, you know, a face-to-face event. Maybe that's number of attendees, time online, engagement rates. But I would say there are things that you can do online that you don't necessarily have the ability. It's much easier to funnel somebody through from your event through to that sponsor's landing page, or as Joe said about food, you know, for me, that's a sponsorship opportunity. Do I, as the event organizer, pay for that? Probably not. I can facilitate it, but what if I've got a sponsor in America that wants to send a certain number of people the bento box with a nice sponsorship message? Or maybe it's as simple as a nicely crafted email with a call to action and a free Uber voucher on it, so you can kind of order Uber Eats or Deliveroo or something like that. So it's all about data and information, but I would focus on the metrics that we're used to: attendees, engagement rates, time spent online, and then just look at ways that we can add to that by funneling people through to where they want to get people to. Does that answer that okay?
That was actually brilliant. That's really good. I like the fact that really, when it comes down to it, you're actually spot on. Your opening slides talk about dealing with drop-off and how it's actually not changed massively. So in the physical events that I organized before COVID, people were preparing us for like 40% of drop-off. And now we're in post-COVID, and it is round about the 50% mark. And you can't get away from that, because you know, all you need to do is click the end button on the bottom of your screen, and you can get up and have a drink or go to the toilet or whatever. So it's that sort of life that we're living at the moment. So that was actually good. Your answer was great, and the stats that have come out from your talk are actually consistent with real life. So another question for you, actually, for this time for Natalie. So you mentioned something in your preparation that made me think. So there's this event planning checklist, which is fantastic. I totally agree with that. And we worked together for a little while now, and you actually do sort of talk and walk the walk. You talked about the resource hub for the check returners event. So when you compiled all that together at the end, were you basically saying, look, these are all the assets we've made for the event? So video, blog posts, they're all in one place, and you left it at that, or did you market that further to the people that came to it?
Yeah, okay. So yeah, it was a compilation of things that we'd asked for throughout the series. So it was, I guess, a strategic decision at the beginning to ask all the speakers for resources that they'd be willing to share, that we could then send out on email after each session. So because there were 8 sessions, it was about keeping engagement high after every session and making people want to come back for a bit more, and also providing a bit of extra value. So after each session, some resources went out, but also people that didn't come to the events were told throughout the period of the 8 sessions that they could access those resources at the end, but they were only available during the 8-session run for the people that came to the events. So it was kind of getting people engaged to say, well, you can have this afterwards if you can't come to the event, you know, you're going to have to give us some data or something like that. So we used it a little for kind of data collection throughout, but then at the end it was free content that we just posted because we'd used it for what we needed to. And then obviously it was the whole event series was around creating community, you know, much the same as this series is, in response to COVID directly. So there was, you know, some marketing activity through the program to use that content as best we could and make it work as hard as it could. And then at the end, it was free for people to consume. And that was, just collecting all of that stuff together and putting it in one place. And then, marketing it out to people who did come to the events to say, oh, you might have come to session 1, but do you know that you can also have all the stuff from sessions 2 to 8 now as well available here for free? And then also marketing to people that didn't come but that were in the wider kind of audience to say, this is what you missed, sort of thing. And then beyond that, there's been kind of video and podcasts as well, but all after the fact, so that when the events were going on, it was kind of a very exclusive sort of, no, only if you come will you get these things.
Yeah, no, that's great. As we were talking then, as I've listened to you guys with your expertise and like hard-earned experience in events, one thing that's come up a few times has been sort of creating community and gathering people around something. And one thing I think we're starting to see now, there's so many events being, advertised that community element is really important. People feeling like there's a reason for me to be a part of this because I can engage in it. And I wondered, so this particular event, our participants know that the audience can't see each other, but they can see the panelists. We're using sort of Zoom Classic webinar approach for this. But how do you feel? This is a question for everyone, actually, before I go to you, Joe, for a very specific question to your excellent talk before. But how do people feel around sort of this drive towards community and face-to-face interaction at events being I think the thing that seals the deal for whether someone signs up to this event at 1:00 in the afternoon versus another one? What do you think?
If I was to say one of the shifts that I'm going to think we're going to see with this kind of format is based on my own experience. So, having done webinars where the audience can't see each other or can't ask us questions like they can in a real live event, I think actually what might happen is, and this is what we did last night for an event that we hosted, we just set things up as a meeting and invited everybody to the meeting. And we trusted that everybody was going to behave themselves. But what that gave then is the people that wanted to see other people and see each other could. And it was very easy and super quick for people to jump in and have comments and ask questions and things like that. So I think we're going to see a move towards that, where it stops being a panel and a faceless audience and more of a collaborative approach, because people are just, people are going to behave themselves in general like they do in a face-to-face event. So I think that's one of the shifts that we're going to see.
I actually agree. We've tried a couple of things this week with doing some face-to-face stuff with breakout sessions, and they've worked well. Some of these events we've planned like a month ago and used the same format. Oh, we did webinar for the first one in March. Let's just carry on using that template. But I agree. I do think that that's going to be the secret sauce for the events that do well, because there's that many, especially if you're doing a series of events. And that's why what Natalie said before brought up this question. I don't know, Natalie, when you guys did your events for tech returners, did they work via webinar? Were they sort of meetings? And how did you do engagement within them?
It said that they were hosted in this same format. So yeah, in webinar format. And I think some of it actually comes down to technical capability and how used to the tech you are as well. There's more room for error running it that meeting way. And like Adam said, we trusted everybody and it all went fine, but it can all not go fine as well. So I think if it's something that maybe a business is doing for the first time, or not overly comfortable with, we got to nearly 10-2 without even badgering, so that's pretty impressive. If they're not overly comfortable with, then I think choose the option that everybody's safe with. I think in this platform, this is the option where you have the most control. But we've all seen also that it does work in the meetings format as well. And I think, if you're using those events to create community and engage people, then yes, people need to be able to speak to each other. I think that if you are coming at it with an already very engaged community that probably might have come to your physical event, then you're probably fairly safe to run it in this format, knowing that there's probably quite a few people in the virtual audience and in the chat that will just start talking to each other in that manner anyway. So I think that there's room for both, and I think there's also considerations on the tech side for the business, the size of the team, how many people are in the background, because you'll know yourself that if you're the host and also the person looking after the tech and the chat and the Q&A and responding to the social media, then that can become quite a challenging position to be in. So I think that is a consideration, but I do think that the meetings function is worthwhile for building community, definitely.
Yeah, great answer. So my question for Joe, and this is kind of also for everybody really, but it's how do we start looking at engaging people in the way that virtual sports day or music concerts seem to do so effortlessly? I've seen this done, but it's always been an informal meeting setting. So, people are asked to bring a hat because it's someone's leaving do and they're doing it on Zoom. And so everyone wears a hat in the meeting. How do you think, just cast your vision around how you think people are going to start making online events feel more personable? And it can be completely random, but I'm intrigued as to what you think.
I think the biggest thing that I learned in creativity is that there's a lot of people say there's no original idea and it's all about stealing. So you mentioned that you look at the music companies that are forward and the big groups that are pushing out this experience that's actually starting to engage. But why can't we just steal from United Stream what they've done and make it a corporate effective way? Like that's why I look everywhere else, like the virtual sports day. I could do that in a corporate environment with their families, and I could put families against families. I've already thought of an idea. I can get it pre-sent. We can cut together a video, do a highlight, and we can have a 30-minute presentation in part of a conference. So it's thinking about these ideas that might already be out there, or I just try and think of like the most wackiest ideas and think, okay, how do I make it corporate? That's kind of my approach. But I just think it's about being able to challenge your client and dare them to want to do it, really. People are like, oh, why would I want to do that? And it's like, actually, let's give someone a break. Let's give them something different than it's just a bit of content and you speaking to them. And it's about trying to have that build of trust. I think it's always hard, especially in a virtual world, because it's all new. If you could show case studies that say, oh, well, actually, I've done this X amount of times and it's made a great feeling or a change in how a staff feel, then that's great. But I feel it's difficult. I think once people start doing the exciting things, you'll start to see a wave of like one idea hits and you'll see a wave through corporate that all of a sudden it's taken. I'm trying to make an idea stick to a client. I'll let you know when it happens and and I'm going forward with it.
Brilliant. Well, I'll retweet it when it goes viral. Yeah, no, this is fantastic. Thank you guys so much. We could carry on. We could literally carry on because there's not only is it like valuable content that we're sharing, but it relates to like all our day jobs, and we can see how we're literally at this frontier, and we can take these ideas and I would certainly be putting things into pitches if I was you, Joseph, that you're mentioning now, because they are strong ideas around engagement and connecting people virtually. So last couple of words really. The next event's going to be on 22nd of July. And if anyone's got any further questions, any burning questions, we've got a question board on the back of this event. It's where we've been running the poll. So we do Q&A with that on social media. So if you post, we'll share that on the chat if I can do briefly. And if you have any questions and wish to post one on there, we will be literally going through all of them on social media and responding to them. So if you guys don't mind, Natalie and Adam and myself, feel free to pitch in on anything you see on Twitter that mentions you and happens to have come through from one of the conversations we've had in here today. So there's the question board for everyone. And we've got 2 minutes. Are there any final thoughts that you guys have for our listeners and potential viewers in future as well on the future of events?
I thought I'd touch on remote working. I just wanted to make sure if people are working, like, don't be afraid to be unproductive, and don't be afraid that if you can't crack the virtual side just yet, because everyone is getting a bit stressed and a bit, oh, what does it mean? Whether you've been furloughed, redundant, or just take a breath. Don't worry. Don't be, it's fine. That's my main piece. I see a lot of people stressing, like, I need to skill up. I need to do this. I need to do that. I need to figure it out. And it's like, it's okay. Like, you don't have to, but also just, take each day, plan maybe an hour just to do a bit of research. Yeah, that was it. Don't worry about being unproductive.
That's great. Thank you for that, Joseph. And Natalie and Adam, any thoughts, any final words?
I think I probably just concur with Joe, actually. It's something that I've kind of thought about at the beginning of lockdown, and it stayed with me as the weeks have gone on, really. But just quite early on, just thought I can't do everything, and that's actually the same. Whether that's being a mum, running a business, homeschooling, which I cannot do, I haven't tried, or whether that's pivoting into something wildly different. You can do some of it, but you can't do all of it, and that's absolutely fine.
I'd have to agree. There will never, ever, ever, ever again in the history of human beings be a 12-week plus holiday ever in summer. I can guarantee you. And you know what? I know there will be lots of people out there worrying about future careers, the industry, redundancies. They're all real things. I'm starting, unfortunately, to see it come through already. But you know what? Even if you're in a job before, there was never any security. So don't stress it. The next opportunity will be there, and hopefully there's companies to go back to and stuff like that. So enjoy the time that you have now to sit, relax, and think about things. So that, yeah, exactly what Joe says, really.
That's amazing. On that very, very positive, heartwarming note, we shall end. So look out for the content that Natalie mentioned coming through on social media, like highlights, what people might have missed, and then the full session again. Thank you so much, Joe, for being a part of this, and Natalie and Adam, and hopefully we'll catch up again in the future. Thank you, guys.